Coming up today, Korea and Japan discuss the agenda for a trilateral summit with China. But Seoul's top diplomat says Tokyo needs to resolve its wartime sex slavery if it wants to improve bilateral ties. Russia begins airstrikes against Islamic State positions in Syria. The United States expresses concern over Moscow's true intentions. Plus, the US slapped sanctions on 2 North Korean companies for engaging in the proliferation of nuclear and missile technology. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 1st of October. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon. The top diplomats of South Korea and Japan have been laying the groundwork for the upcoming summit between their countries and China. Japan is eager to hold a bilateral summit with Korea on the sidelines of that meeting, but Seoul says its focus is on making the three-way summit a success. Our foreign affairs correspondent Song Ji-sun reports.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se sat down with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida in New York on Wednesday local time. The two countries are preparing for a trilateral summit with China that is set for later this month or early next month in Seoul. It is expected that the three leaders will seek enhanced cooperation on pursuing peace on the Korean peninsula and prosperity in Northeast Asia. However, there is no word yet on whether President Park Geunhye will hold their first one-on-one summit talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on the sidelines of the three-way summit.
We are currently focused on making the trilateral summit a success. As for a bilateral summit between Korea and Japan, we will hold working-level talks at the Director General level as the next step.
Korea and Japan last held summit talks in 2012, but relations have soured badly over the past 3 years due to Japan's territorial claims to Korea's Dokdo Island and Tokyo's refusal to resolve issues related to its sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. The latter is a particularly emotive issue for Koreans, especially as the number of surviving registered victims is now below 50. Following the meeting, Minister Yoon reiterated the importance of resolving the sex slavery issue at an early date in order to improve relations between the two countries and for summit talks to take place. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The United States has imposed sanctions on 2 North Korean companies for engaging in nuclear and missile technology proliferation activity. The U.S. Federal Register said last week, in fact, that the companies are the Korea Mining and Development Corporation and Haesong Trading Corporation and their affiliates. The sanctions, which will be in effect for 2 years, bans trade with both companies and all U.S. government contracts. It's the second such activity by the U.S. in just a month after it slapped sanctions on North Korean arms development and trading companies in September. President Park Geunhye has used the occasion of South Korea's Armed Forces Day to send a strong message to North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. Speaking at a ceremony at the Armed Forces headquarters in Chungcheongnam-do province this morning, she reiterated Seoul's demand that Pyongyang immediately halt its development of nuclear and missile technology. The president also paid tribute to past and present service members for their dedication and sacrifices. Special guests were invited to this year's event, marking the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule. About 100 Korean War veterans from UN member states and their families were invited to the event for the first time. Russia has launched its first airstrikes in war-torn Syria. Moscow says its jets are bombing targets controlled by the so-called Islamic State. The United States has condemned Russia and it is accusing President Putin of having ulterior motives. Son Jung-in reports.
Russia's defense ministry says its air force carried out around 20 missions targeting Islamic State militants in Syria on Wednesday and destroyed 8 positions belonging to the extremists, including a command center. The airstrikes included areas in central Homs and Hama provinces. However, the United States expressed doubts Moscow targeted IS-held territories as claimed. Washington believes the strikes were instead directed against opposition rebels threatening Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad. Syria's main Western-backed opposition group says one airstrike killed 36 civilians, including 5 children, in homes. Moscow denies civilians were killed. The warplanes started their mission shortly after the Russian parliament unanimously voted to allow Vladimir Putin to use the Air Force to target militants. The U.S. and Russia are planning to hold military talks to ensure they do not come into accidental conflict during their respective air campaigns in Syria. Holding a press conference with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at UN headquarters in New York, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said talks could take place as early as Thursday.
So, as Sergei said to you, we agreed on the imperative of as soon as possible, perhaps even as soon as tomorrow, but as soon as possible, having a military-to-military deconfliction discussion.
The latest development has intensified debates on strategies to defeat violent extremists in the region. U.S. President Barack Obama and his Russian counterpart clashed over how to resolve the Syrian crisis at the UN General Assembly earlier in the week. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now, the head of the International Monetary Fund says there's reason to be worried about the global economy. In a speech Wednesday, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde said a marked slowdown in big emerging markets will cut global growth to its lowest level since the deep global recession of 2009. She said it's unclear whether the current situation is cyclical or represents a fundamental downturn. Lagarde added that the prospect of a rate hike in the US and China's slowdown are contributing to uncertainty and higher market volatility. And with the continuing uncertainties in the global economy, many emerging countries are facing a greater risk of going bankrupt. New data shows Korea's credit default risk is at a 2-year high, and slowing exports aren't making the situation any better. Gwon-soo reports.
Korea's 5-year credit default swap premium on its sovereign debt hit 82.43 basis points at the end of last month, according to market research firm Markit. That's the lowest since September 2013 and a big leap from the end of last year. A CDS premium is often used to indicate the creditworthiness of a company or country. Korea's risk premium rate has been on an upward trend since China's stock market plunge in July and its currency devaluation in August. The risk rate had appeared to decrease for a short while, but it went up again for Korea and other emerging countries last month after the U.S. decided not to raise its interest rates. The average risk increase rate for this year was at nearly 62% for Brazil, followed by Malaysia at 56% and Korea at almost 52%. Korea's major companies have been hit hard too. Top conglomerate Samsung Electronics CDS premium jumped to a 2-year 3-month high, and other big-name companies saw their biggest risk rates in 1 to 2 years. Analysts point to the uncertainties stemming from China's slowing growth as the main culprit, especially because of the impact that has had on exporters. Korea's trade ministry said Thursday the volume of outbound shipments in September fell by 8.3% from the same month last year, resulting in the 9th straight month of decline this year. Korea's exports to China dropped by 5% from the year before, but the ministry said the news isn't all bad considering the export figures for August, when exports plunged by almost 15%. Shipments to Europe jumped by almost 20% due to an economic recovery there, and next month looks brighter with higher demand from North America expected due to Black Friday sales that signal the start of the holiday shopping season in the U.S. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
Now, staying with economic news, but rather more positive, Korea's industrial output has risen for 3 months in a row now, as the country steadily recovers from the after effects of the recent MERS outbreak. Statistics Korea says the country's overall output rose 0.5% on month in August, year-on-year growth was higher at 1.3%. By sector, the biggest growth was seen in the production of telecommunication devices and semiconductors. This has been attributed to the release of new handsets as well as government policies to boost consumer spending. Production in the mining, manufacturing, gas and electricity industries increased 0.4% on month in August. Production in the service sector gained by the same margin. Samsung Electronics is the second most innovative firm in the Internet of Things industry, right behind Intel and just ahead of Google and IBM. This is according to a ranking of the top Internet of Things companies based on data by industry tracker WT This marks a huge leap for the Korean tech giant. It has climbed 7 places from 9th last year. Internet of Things is the concept in which all physical objects are connected to the internet and can identify themselves to other devices. WT says Samsung received its rank for expanding Internet of Things devices and components and creating an open ecosystem to support the developer community. Intel, which has been ranked first in the industry since 2014, is estimated to have amassed $2.1 billion in Internet of Things related revenue last year. Korea's Ministry of Environment has begun emissions testing on Volkswagen cars suspected of running emissions cheating software. 3 Volkswagen brands and 1 Audi model will be subject to the tests, which will take place both in labs and on the road. Authorities say both processes are needed as the installed software reflects vastly different emissions output figures. Now, the test results are expected to be released next month. Audi Volkswagen Korea, which is the local affiliate of the German automaker, said it will wait for the results and further communication with Volkswagen headquarters before instituting a recall. Of the estimated 11 million Volkswagen vehicles affected worldwide, sources say the automaker expects to recall about 100,000 units in Korea. Now, Britain's Sherlock Holmes is one of the most popular foreign TV series here in Korea, but Korea remains the only nation in the OECD to ban private investigators. The government supports legalization, but the expected side effects are stirring some opposition. Lee Soo-eun reports.
Crime scene investigation. Undercover duty. He's trying to clear his friend of false accusation, but in Korea, where private detectives are illegal, there are limitations.
The police and the prosecutors handle the big cases, but there are also those left unprotected. Since private investigation is illegal, there's no one to collect evidence for these conflicts and trials.
The government is in support. Just over a week ago, the police opened a blog that updates information on legalizing private investigation. It expects some 4,000 jobs to be created and hopes private investigators will help solve insurance fraud cases, find missing children, and even more. But there are concerns.
If access to an individual's private information is given to the private sector, that in itself raises the possibility of privacy violation. Realistically, only the rich can hire private detectives, so it creates an imbalance of information in judicial proceedings.
Citizens are also divided in the debate.
I'm against it because I feel like I'm being watched.
I think it's okay because they'll solve cases that the police can't solve.
Facing tense debate, bills to legalize private investigations are stalling. It seems that preparation against the potential side effects, like training and supervision, is necessary to break through the doors of the National Assembly. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Now, in cultural news, the annual Seoul International Dance Festival has begun. It features modern dance from around the world, and the opening performances at this year's festival showcases the traditional Spanish folk dance flamenco. Our Kim Ji-yeon takes us there.
An image of a woman dancing elegantly in a red frilly dress, striking relentlessly on the wooden floor. That's generally the most staple icon representing flamenco, or folk music created by gypsies of Spain's Andalusia region that has been passed down from generation to generation. But the opening piece for the Seoul International Dance Festival, Image, by the Ballet National d'Espagne shows that flamenco can be reinvented by incorporating elements of tradition as well as creativity.
The piece was made to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Ballet Nacional d'Espagne. It's a collection of stories about the company's 5 directors and their efforts to improve flamenco.
Chairs used in the first piece are reminiscent of the late dancer Mario Maya, who directed the ballet during the 1990s and who often used a piece of furniture in his work. Incorporating this prop to the 3 core elements of the traditional dance, cante, the singing, baile, the dancing, and the doke, the guitar element, is not easy work, as flamenco is much more structured than what most people think.
One has to take into consideration that flamenco was not passed down by written means, but by word of mouth. This element forces the artist to work within the framework and come up with new versions.
Some 40 pieces from about 30 countries will be featured at this year's Seoul International Dance Festival, which runs until October 18th. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.